Hello, everyone. Good morning, and a very warm welcome to my class. So, today we are going to discuss one of the famous topic of plus two second year, um, written by Khuswant Singh. Um, it has been taken from Khuswant Singh's written one of the book, and the name of the topic is The Portrait of a Lady, right? This is the particular topic we find out in different levels of uh, learners, from the school levels to college levels, right? So we find out that this is a um, popular excerpt of the writer Khuswant Singh, which he discussed in this particular book. So if I'm talking about the portrait of a lady, right, this particular um, excerpt is indicating about the two generation. The two generation means you can talk about the writer Khusbant Singh's generation, and another is writer's grandmother, her generation. Here, the writer Khusbant Singh discusses about his grandmother, and while he is describing, so here if you see that the title is indicating portrait. The meaning of portrait here in this particular context, we can say the description, mm, or the characteristic, um, or the qualities, or the appearance that have been picturized of a lady. A lady, here the lady is referring as writer's grandmother, right? So that is why the portrait of a lady means the characteristic of a lady, or the means appearance of a lady, or the qualities of a lady, or you can say that the description of a lady, right? That is what the writer Khusbant Singh tries to show. Who was that lady? How does writer's relationship with her, and uh, what else the writer discusses about her, right? And how she was the means limelight of writer's life, right? All those things we can get through this particular excerpt. When I say that excerpt, it means it is the part of means Khusbant Singh's written one of the autobiographical sketch where it is taken, or from which it is taken. This is one of the famous excerpt we normally find out in all these um, academical school books. Even it's in a plus two second year higher secondary books also. It is a one of the topic. Now let's discuss about this topic. Before we um, go to discuss this particular topic, let me introduce the author. Who is Khusbant Singh actually? So Khusbant Singh was born in the year of 1915, 2nd February. Is a prominent, uh, बहुत ही means famous इंडियन इंग्लिश राइटर हैं एंड जर्नलिस्ट भी हैं, राइट, और थे. So his weekly column, right, with the Malays towards one and all. So every week there was a particular topic with Malays towards one and all used to be published in Indian newspaper, right? So or several Indian newspapers. So he is among the most widely, right, or he is one of the most renowned writer whose written columns is widely read also. So सब उनके जो राइटिंग थे उनको प्रेज करते थे और उनको पढ़ते भी थे. He is well known in Indian literary history, right, as one of the finest. Finest means something called as a, his writings are uh, motivating and also attracting and also indicating to the common man's life. Right, he is well known in Indian literary history as one of the finest historians, right, and also novelist. A forthright political commentator, he also gives his views on politics, right? So he is an outstanding observer and a critic of social life. Now let's see that discuss the first unit. So what does it mean? So what does this warm up actually? Now the warm up tries to give us the idea what we are going to learn in the first unit, right? So when we are talking about this particular topic, the portrait of a lady, so it comes with some of the question. The first question it asks that do you enjoy your grandparents' company? So क्या हम grandparents के साथ रहना पसंद करते हैं? Yes, if you ask me this question, so I would say that yes, we love actually or we enjoy our grandparents' company, right? Are they good companions? Yes, they are good companions because they means love us, they take care of us a lot. Children grow up with a typical image of their grandparents in their mind. So if you look into the 20 years back and if you look into the present day situation, so we find out a kind of a differentiation. Yet mm, there are children so who know about that the grandparents are nothing but a kind of companions who used to give tell stories, who saves who save means save their grandchildren from from their parents from beating, right, and also give them chocolates and also give them a lot of love, right. Any other thought is almost revolting to them, right, or any other thought is almost revolting to them. So even means they have also different notions about grandparents. So we will read the following unit of the text and we will note how the writer describes or portrays his grandmother, right. Now coming to the discussion of the first unit text, the writer stated here that his grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, right, so was an old woman. She had been old and wrinkled, right. So for the 20 years that I had known her, people said that she had once been young and pretty and had even had a husband, but that was hard to believe. My grandfather's portrait hung above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. Now, the first paragraph gives the idea that writer is not making any kind of a differentiation. He was saying that his grandmother was not unique. He was like everybody's, right? So, and his grandmother, when he started describing about his grandmother, he was telling that his grandmother was old, right? And she had been old and wrinkled. Wrinkled means that's called as when your skin gets loose and also when you turn old your skin gets loose and also you will find out the crisscross mark on your face and also on your skin, right. So uh, अगर देखा जाए तो रिंकल का मतलब होता है जब मीन्स हम बहुत ही ओल्ड एज हो जाते हैं तो हमारा स्किन बहुत लूज हो जाता है, राइट. सो दैट्स कॉल्ड एज अ रिंकल. So wrinkled for the 20 years that I had known her. So writer knew his grandmother last 20 years, right? And the author also stated that what means People used to say that means his grandmother was or had once been young and pretty, beautiful, and even had a husband. It means now she is widow, right? So, but that was hard to believe. So the writer could not believe it because the writer means saw his grandmother is old, right? So that is why he could not believe that. So he also stated that his grandmother's portrait. Here, the meaning of portrait is called as a photo, right? Picture, or called as a frame. So he said that his grandmother's picture hung above the mantelpiece. So mantelpiece is something called as a, a kind of a, what do we say that? A kind of a layer, right, on it, or you can say that mantelpiece is called as a fireplace, right? So above of it, so the picture of a writer's grandfather was hung, right, and that particular mantelpiece in the drawing room. So he stated that looking at the grandfather's portrait and thinking about grandmother, so he could not believe that his grandmother was young and pretty once, right? So he wore a big turban and loose fitting clothes. So the author stated here that how his grandfather looked like. His grandfather wore a big turban. So obviously, so they belong to a Sikh family. So that's why uh, they used to wear a turban, right? And loose fitting clothes, so like pajamas. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest, and he looked at least 100 years old. So looking at the physical appearance, looking at the beard and the kind of a dress up. So in the picture, the author stated that his grandfather was exactly looking like 100 years old man. He did not look the sort of person who would have a wife or children, right? So it means his grandfather uh, seemed like what very old, right? And the author had a belief that he did not look like means he would have a wife or children. It seemed like what mm, maybe he was a monk or something like that's what you can assume, and the author could assume that also monk or priest like that. He looked at if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. So even means not that, then he could have looked like what? Lots of and lots of grandchildren, right? So means in such old his appearance was. So the author means thought that what he must have a lot of grandchildren. As for my grandmother being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. So the writer means, said that what now he did not believe the idea that his grandmother was young and pretty once, and that thought was making him, all the time a kind of a question in his mind. She often told us of the games she used to play as a child. So how does means a writer make a relationship with his grandmother. The author stated that writer's grandmother means used to play games, right, during his childhood days or during the writer's childhood age. She often told us of the games she used to play as a child, and that seemed quite absurd and undignified on her part. So absurd means ridiculous. The kind of a game she used to play, it's seeming like ridiculous and also means undignified on her part. Undignified means something which has no respect, right? So silly, right? Silly on her part. And we treated it like the fables of the prophets she used to tell us, right? So the author stated that she played the game she used to play as a child. So the kind of a game she used to play in her childhood age, that game she used to play means with the writer. And the writer also stated that whenever she tells us any kind of a fables of the prophets, right? Fables means that's called as an ancient story, right? She used to tell means the writer, right? So those of the stories seem like what stupid and also called as no logic, illogical. You can say that, right? That seemed quite absurd or illogical or means without any, you know, means evidence, right? So the story have no meaning also, right? So like the fables of the prophet, she used to tell us she had always been short and fat and slightly bent. The writer stated that how does his mother's appearance or his grandmother's appearance? His grandmother was uh, exactly looking like a short in height, was fat and also stooped. Stooped means slightly bent also, right? Her face was a crisscross of wrinkles, so like locha kocha ho jana, right, or called as a loosen ho jana. So and you can say that crisscross marks, spot marks from everywhere to everywhere. हर जगह पे आप means वहाँ पे crisscross mark हुआ है. No, we were certainly no, we were certainly in she had always been. Right. So the author had a thought that such kind of appearance, she had always been. She had always been means she. That's what made the writer sure. That's what made the writer sure that what no, the author or his grandmother, right, must not be young and also pretty, because the kind of appearance the author had been seeing in his grandmother was exactly like last 20 years. That is why the author stated, no, we were certainly in she had always been, as we had known her, old, terribly old, that she could not have grown older. The author also stated that she turned into such an age that she could not have grown older, right? So reaching to a particular age, after that she could not be coming older, right? Even the author stated that what now last 20 years he saw his grandmother, and his grandmother was means exactly in the same old situation, old state, and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. She could never have been pretty, she could never have been pretty, right? But she was always beautiful. But she was always beautiful, right? Uh, she hobbled about the house in spotless white, with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop, and the other telling the bits of her rosary, right? She could never have been pretty, right? But she was always beautiful. Who was always beautiful? Now, the writer's grandmother, right? So, how the writer's grandmother was always beautiful and have been pretty, right? Like the kind of dresses, the kind of means of fond for her grandchild or grandchildren. So, those of the things can be indicating as the quality of the grandmother, that she could never have been pretty. She could never have been pretty, but she was always beautiful, beautiful in her quality. She hobbled, right? She hobbled means move about, right? She hobbled about the house in spotless means like fine white sari, with one hand putting on her vest, right? So vest is nothing but means upper part of the thigh, right? So one hand resting on her vest. Why? Why does she put her hand on her vest? Now to make herself balance, right? So make herself balance, her stoop, right? Stoop means bending down. So in old days, what happened? Women used to in old age, women used to make themselves, take the help of the stick, right? So, or also sometime what happened means wheelchair. But here, the writer stated that his grandmother was just stoop or called as a bending down. So that's why to make herself control her balance, she used to put her hand on her waist, and the other the other telling the bits of her rosary. So, what do you mean by bits of a rosary? So, the meaning of bits of a rosary is called as a mali, right? It's called as a kind of a during the old age means our grandmother and grandfather used to pray, chant, holding one of the means beads, right? So, bits of a rosary means bits of rosary is called as a one of the particular um, what do you say that chain type, right? But having a small round circle means stone type connected into one with the another, right? And every time means old man and old woman used to chant using using that bits of rosary, right? In Hindi we can say that japna, mali japna, right? So her silver locks, so here silver locks is referring to his her hair, right? Which was completely white in color, and the author stated that her silver locks, right, that were scattered untightly. Scattered means spread here and there everywhere, and not looking also clean over her pugged, pale and puckered face. Pale and puckered face means what? Odd and also spot mark face. So hair means that's spread here and there on the odd and puckered face. Her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer, and every time her she was chanting something, continuously chanting, and her prayer cannot be audible to others. Inaudible prayer. So, in mind or in means in heart, she constantly, you, she constantly means praise the God. Yes, she was beautiful, right? The author stated that she was beautiful. She was like a winter landscape in the mountains. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains, an expanse an expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. So, the author is comparing and saying that her beauty is comparing with what? Like the landscape. Landscape means a picture in the mountains. So, during the winter time, so the kind of a picture we find out at the top of the mountain, like how the mist is covered and it looks white in color, right? An expanse of pure. So it seems like what her means her face appears with the pure, holy, white, right? Calm. Serenity means calm. So calm breathing, right? So breathing peaceful things coming out of her, right? So she seemed like satisfied, right? So she was an expanse of pure white serenity. Serenity means calm, and she was telling something, it seems like peaceful and also satisfaction, right? So that's what the author stated about her grandmother. Now, yep. So we understood till this, right, that how does the author discuss about his grandmother in the first unit, that how the grandmother, author's grandmother's appearance was, how he looked like, and mm, how the author compared means his grandmother with means nature, right? The author also carried some kind of a dubious thought in his mind. He was telling that how his grandmother means um, uh, should not be means or cannot be beautiful, cannot be pretty and beautiful, right? So because and she doesn't also grow older and older. So all those things which he told about his means grandmother. Now moving to the second unit, what the second unit says. The second unit also starts with one of the question or couple of things, like grandmothers are generally affectionate, is not it? means they are caring, they are protective, they are lovable, right? So that is what, that is the quality of the grandmothers. We know that, right? We also know that that in some of the areas, grandmothers portrayed as a negative character, but here in this particular um, except the author tries to present the positive aspect of the grandmothers by saying that grandmothers' qualities are affectionate, protective, and caring. Now let's go for reading this unit of the text and note how the writer's grandmother looked after. Looked after means how the writer's grandmother's uh, relation with the writer, right, in their village during his childhood age. So we can say that what means writer uh, spent spent his means quality time with his grandmother in their village, and during that time, so grandmother was looking after him, right? So it means taking care of writers. Okay, let's read that. Okay, now you can see that the text begins with by saying, "My grandmother and I were good friends." So writer stated here that his relationship with his grandmother was like a friendship or like a friend. So he said that he and his grandmother's uh, or his grandmother and he were good friends. He also stated his parents, right, left him with her, with the grandmother, when the writer when they went to live in the city, and they were constantly together, right? So she used to wake me up in the morning and get me ready for school. She said her morning prayer in a monotonous sing song. Monotonous, it's called as a dull, boring, right? So sing song while she bathed and dressed me in the hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart. The writer stated, I listened because I loved her voice, but never bothered to learn it. Then she would fetch my wooden slate, which she had already washed and plastered with the yellow chalk, a tiny earthen ink pot, and a reed pen, tie them all in a bundle, and hand it to me. After a breakfast of a thick, stale chapati with a little butter and sugar sprayed on it, we went to school. She carried several stale chapatis with her for the village dogs. So the the paragraph of the second unit tries to give us a very very means beautiful descriptions of the writer and writer's grandmother's relationship. So how does writer's parents were means writer's parents were means living in the city, right? And writer grandmother and writer, they were constantly stay together in the village, right? So and writer's grandmother used to do all these means daily activities, and also making the writer ready for everything, right? So every morning she used to wake me up, right? She means she used to wake the writer up in the morning and get him ready for the school, right? So while also making the writer ready for the school, she used to also sing morning prayer, right, in a monotonous doll voice while the she was making bath the writer and dressed him. So why does one do such kind of a thing to in a hope that what now the writer listen and understand it by heart, right? So the author also listened it, but he did not worry to remember those things, right? Even the writer's grandmother used to uh, fetch the writer's wooden slate. So during that time, right, when children go to school, primary school, they used to carry a wooden slate, wood made slate, right? So which the writer's grandmother washed and plastered already, right? And with yellow chalk. So with that washed and plastered with yellow chalk, right, slate. So a tiny earthen ink pot was also given and a reed pen. So ink pot means in the a kind of a clay earthen pot. Earthen means clay made pot, right? In it, some ink are there, right, or some ink is there, and you can say that, and a reed pen also means bound into it. So tie them all in a bundle, and what is that? That called as wooden slate, yellow chalk, wooden slate with yellow chalk, a tiny earthen ink pot, and a reed pen. So all are tied and bundled and handed it to the writer's hand, right, after a breakfast of thick. So how was his breakfast in the morning time? So he used to take, or grandmother used to give a huge breakfast, right, to the writer. So stel chapati, stel means, so you can say that last night chapati, right, whatever the chapati left in the last night, so that chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on it, right, on that stel chapati. Stale means called as a, something which of not the fresh, right? So she carried several stale chapati with her also, right? While taking the writer into the school, or while taking the writer towards the school, so she carried some of the stale chapati with her. Why? For the village dogs. The writer also stated, "My grandmother always went to school with with me, right? Because the school was attached to the temple." So why does the writer's grandmother go to school with the writer? Because the school was attached to the temple. That is the first thing. So if the temple was attached to the school, so means how does it related to the grandmother's going to school? Now the priest taught us the alphabet and the morning prayer, while the children sat in rows on either side of the veranda, singing the alphabet or the prayers in a chorus. My grandmother sat inside reading the scriptures. Right, when we had both finished, we would walk back together. Right. This time the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. They followed us, our home growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis we threw to them. Right. The writer wanted to convey a message here that writer's grandmother always went to school with the writer. The reason of going is that because the school was attached to the temple, right? So, and another thing is called as a means the priest taught the writer, right, and also children alphabet and the morning prayer, right? That's what the priest of the temple taught the children alphabet and the morning prayer, while the children sat in rows, right? Sat in rows means what? Like column and rows wise. Children sat in rows on both of the side of the veranda, right? Temple veranda. So they were also singing as the priest priest told them to do, right? So singing the alphabet or the prayer in a chorus. The writer also stated that his grandmother sat inside reading the scriptures, right? So while the writer was just sitting on the veranda singing the alphabet or the prayer in a group, chorus means group, so, writer's grandmother sat inside reading the scriptures. Reading the scriptures means he read the means the holy books of the God. When we had both finished, so when we had means a writer and writer's grandmothers finished their means job, like what a writer's grandmother finished reading scriptures or holy books of the God. So and um, writers um, school also done, right? So they would walk back together, so they would come back together, and while they were coming, so what they found, Now, this time the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. So, like usually we know that if we give food to the dogs in a particular place, so the dog come to that place means every day, right or not? So, this has also happened with the writer and writer's grandmother. So, this time the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. So, the dogs were there already. So, they were waiting for the grandmothers to distribute uh, roti to them. So they followed the writer and writer's grandmother to till to their home, right? Till to their home, right? Growling and fighting. So growling means what? They were making noise. They were fighting with each other. Why? And for the chapatis, we threw to them. For the chapatis, we threw to them means the chapatis that they brought from their home for the for these um, dogs. So they threw to them, right? So with this means they such kind of activities every day. Okay. Now, uh, so this is the first and the second unit. So we will discuss the third unit, right? Yeah. So let's go for the third unit. What does it actually say? Right. So what happened after that? Like we find out the first unit tells about the appearance of the writer's grandmother, whereas the second unit tells about the writer's means a relationship with her grandchildren, right? And sorry, writer's relation with his grandmother, and how they were means spending their means time in their village when writer's parents were means writer's parents went to city, right? Now coming to the unit 3, so unit 3 tells us that life in the village is quite different from city life. Now it is an argumentative question, right or not? So life in the village is quite different from city life. So it tells us that how village life and city life are different to each other, right? Family relationship also changes, right? Yes. Identifiers are modified. Identifiers are modified. There is a turning point in relationship, right? The following unit will tell us the text and note how a turning point occurs in the writer's relationship with his grandmother. The writer's relationship with his grandmother, right? Now, if I am talking about this particular thing, life in the village is quite different from city life. How life in the village is? Now we can see that if you look into the village life, we find out it's a very calm, right, comfortable, right, fresh air and greenery everywhere. Means you will find out the trees and agricultural lands and thatched houses, right? Uh, so and means you can say that kacha roads, right? So uh, those are interesting. Like and you can find out also there were means of ponds, rivers. So those of the things are covered in the village areas. So and we also understand that the kind of people and their emotion attached in village areas, like they are very humble, polite, and not crude in mind. So it is also the disadvantage also we find out in village area, that is called as not developed. Not developed, you can say that what you won't find out the hospitals, you won't find out the um, uh, nearby police station or called as a fire station. So if anything occurs, then people have to walk a mile to reach the city, right? Or sometime also they go to the town by walk, do not have a good transportation. So if anything major occurs, they have to also reach to city for hours it take, right? So that is why, if we look into it, life in the village is, um, you can say that maybe um, village areas, or village slum areas, or rural areas are not developed, but life in that, right, it's called as a peaceful. Whereas if we talk about city life, what do we find out in city lives? We have everything, yet we carry the tension in our means, everyday life, right? Like, we think of means, um, we think of busy lives. We do not have time for our family members. Means, the air the air pollution was also not good, and though we have a developed means, developed or modern means hospitals, modern, um, means, you can find out uh, modern road conditions, and everything is settled for the people, right? So yet also, the city life is full of speed, right? It does not mm, give the time to the human being to talk for a moment, and express means, their emotion to others, right? So, but at the same time, if means, it gives the opportunity, right, to uh, live a better life, to get a better education, to get the better health care, right? And it gives you all these things near to your hand, right? So that's what we can find out. Family relationship also changes, identifies are modified. There is a turning point in relationship, right? The kind of a relationship we have made, or we have formed during our childhood days, that the same relationship we don't find out after getting old, right? So the following unit will tell us, and give us the idea that how a turning point occurs in the writer's relationship with his grandmother. So, uh, if we talk about writer's relationship with his grandmother, so how it was changed, let's see that. Mm. Now, we can see that the writer stated, when my mothers were comfortably, oh, sorry, when my parents were comfortably settled in the city means, when writer's parents went to the city and lived the writer in the care of means writer's grandmother, right? So after living in the city, settled themselves, right? So what happened? They called the writer's grandmother and writer to come to the city. So they sent for us, and that was a turning point. Please note down. So what was the turning point? The writer and writer's grandmother both were living in the village in a very comfortable life, and they had a very good relationship, and so they formed a kind of a friendship, right? But once they were called to come means city, so that was a turning point in their relationship or their friendship. So although we shared the same room, so they both were living in the same room, writer and writer's grandmother. But his grandmother no longer came to school with the writer. In village, what happened? Means the writer's grandmother used to go with the writer to his school, right? And while coming back, means she was also coming with him. The writer used to go to an English school, right? So, but in city, writer used to go to an English school in a motor bus, right? Here, the transportation mode was available, so that's why he was going means in a motor bus, and there were no dogs also, right, in the streets, and she took to feeding sparrows. So, as the ducks were means not there, ducks were there in the village, and here we find out that dogs were not there in the streets. So that's why she fed sparrows, right, in the courtyard of our city house. Courtyard means referring to as a means front yard of the house, right, or called as the space which was left for gardening, right, the courtyard of our city house. as the years rolled by, the meaning of rolled by is called as a passed by. So years passed by, we saw less of each other. So we could not meet to each other, we could not talk to each other a lot. For sometimes she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. What she used to do, she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. When I came back, she would ask me what the teacher had taught me, right? So you can say that what they used to talk, but they used to talk very less. And specifically, the author pointed about some of the time, like she continued to wake me up in the morning time, prepared me for school, and she asked me also what the teacher had taught, right? I would tell her English words and the little things of Western science and learning, right? The law of gravity, Archimede, Archimedes principle, the world being round, right? So it means the author used to tell literature, science, geography, mathematics, and all about the um, you know world being round, means all those things whichever is taught in school, right? And this made her unhappy. Why? Now, because she could not help the writer with her, with his lessons, because she did not know all these means things a lot. So that's why she could not help the writer with his lessons. She did not believe in the things they taught at the English school and was distressed that there was no teaching about God and the scriptures. Even we know that, right? Our parents and grandparents always want uh, that their children or their grandchildren means uh, must. So they always want for what means that their children and grandchildren uh, must learn good things, right? So like the kind of things have been taught at the English school, and that was actually making the writer's grandmother distressed, lots of worry, right? So uh, she believed that there was no teaching about God and God's related means theory, right, or scriptures or God's written books, Ramayana or Mahabharata. So one day he announced that, right? One day I, I means the writer announced that means that the children of the school were being given music lessons, right? So in schools, music, paintings, all such kind of things were given. In city, the writer said that what means in his school, he or his school, his class, right? So was being given music lessons. She was very disturbed. Who was very disturbed? The writer's grandmother. Why? Now, when she heard that in school children were children were being given music lessons, she was very disturbed. So why? Now, because he believed that music had lewd association. So what do you mean by music lewd association? So music create the bad association or bad companions, right? So it was the monopoly. So it was the monopoly means what? Now those people who learn music, so they do they are nothing but the means harlots and beggars. Harlots means what? Now women who earn money by singing songs, and beggars means beg by means singing song. And then the music is not meant for the common people, right? Normal people. She said nothing, but her silence meant disapproval. The author said that what means how the writer's grandmother made herself completely quiet, right? Her, and when she did not speak or she did not oppose, right? So it seemed like what? Now she did not want me to learn music. So she rarely talked to me after that. So after that, the writer's grandmother did not talk to the writer a lot, right? Or hardly talk to the writer a lot, or hardly writer talk to the writer, right? Now, that is what we can say. Harlots means called as a woman who used to sing song for earning money, right? And beggars who beg money by singing song, right? So these were the things, right? The writer means found changes in city, right? So after coming from village to the city, so she found the changes, or sorry, the writer found the changes his relationship with his grandmother in city. So hope you understand. Okay, so let me continue the same third unit. So the writer stated, when I went up to the university, or when I went up to university, right? So he was given a room of his own, right? So now imagine that they made the relationship in they made the friendship relationship in school, in village, right? So and then after when they came to city, the friendship, um, the friendship was not that, uh, because it was changed. uh, Writer's grandmother means did some of the things, right? Waking the writer in the morning and preparing him for the school, right? So and used to ask means what was the thing taught in the school. Yet the kind of a relationship they did not form, right? Or they did not continue, right? The kind of a relationship they were maintaining in village, right? So even the writer's relationship with his grandmother was held rare when the writer's grandmother came to know that the writer was learning music lessons. So after that, it continued. So even the detachment occurred a lot. The writer stated when he went up to university, he was given a room of his own. So the common link of friendship was broken, snapped. So the kind of a relationship they had, right, was also broken, right? So the writer stated, my grandmother accepted her seclusion. The meaning of seclusion is called as a isolation, right? Isolation means called as a akele rehna, right? Isolation. So my grandmother accepted her seclusion with the resignation. With resignation means a voluntary, right? So स्वयं ही उन्होंने डिसाइड कर लिया कि वो अकेले ही रहेंगे, right? Voluntary, right? Voluntary. Voluntary, she decides that. Voluntary means अपने आप में ही सोच लेना. She rarely left her spinning wheel. So we know that the spinning wheel is called as a kind of a object which you can with the cloths. She rarely left her spinning wheel, means every time she is busy with her spinning wheel to talk to anyone, from sunrise to sunset. From sunrise to sunset, she sat by her wheel, right? Spinning and reciting prayers. So, what is her daily work now? Now, her daily work from sunrise to sunset was nothing but wheel spinning, and spinning means using that uh, spinning wheel to weave the cloth, and also means reciting prayers. Reciting means what? Now, chanting prayers, right? All the time with that bits of rosary. Only in the afternoon, so during the afternoon, she felt relaxed and for a while for a while to feed the sparrows. So while giving food to the sparrows, she was means, finding herself a kind of a comfortable. While she sat in the veranda, breaking in the bread into little bits, hundreds of little birds collected round her, right? Creating a veritable bedlam. So creating a veritable bedlam means called as a means variety of sounds, noise. a noise of chirping, right? So veritable noise of a variety of sounds of chirping coming out from the birds. Some of the birds came and sat on her legs, right, or perched. Perched means sitting on her legs, right? Others on her shoulders. Some even sat on her head, right? She smiled, but she never shooed them away. What do you mean by shoot? Now make them say goodbye or get out, right? Get out. She never shout on them, right? She never say means get out or means shout on them, right? So she believed that it was or it used to be the happiest happen hour of the day for her. So you can say that means throughout the day she used to get this particular happen hour time, right? So which was nothing but the happiest happy hour of the day. So she felt very happy, right, um, by spending the time with the sparrow. So that's all. We will discuss the fourth unit and other units in our next class, right? Till then, let me say bye to you, right? I hope you understand the kind of discussion we had done today, right? Mm, Unit 4 and Unit 4 is left, right? Mm. So that we will discuss in the next class. Okay, thank you.